Hello YouTubers. Today I thought I would tell you one of my stories that I wrote, and this one's entitled Snakes. And if you pardon me, I'm going to read it because I don't want to forget any of it, so excuse the glare off of these glasses because I'm blind as a bat without them on. Now, this story is entitled Snakes. Being from the South and having grown up in Georgia and Florida, and taking into consideration my age and that I've always worked and played outdoors, you can pretty well assume it's a sure bet that I've had my encounters with snakes. To that light, I thought I would share some snake experiences with you. I suppose I could write a book about the subject, but considering that this is a short story, I will but briefly touch on some of the highlights of my experiences. If you have ever been traumatized by a snake, you will be more able to relate to what I have to say about them. As a boy at the age of 5 or 6, I was so severely frightened by a snake that it affected me forever. So that's where I begin this story. My brothers and I lived at that time in McCray, Georgia with our mother. We were usually clad only in a pair of shorts and nothing else, and played and roamed the small sawmill community which was across from and attached to what was then the Shepherd Lumber Company, where my grandfather was employed as a cruiser. I tell you all this so that you will have a true image of a tough, barefoot little boy running up and down the dirt roads and woods, and who was afraid of virtually nothing. Little did I know at the time that that would all change, but life's experiences is what makes a child grow up, and hopefully they will leave you somewhat wiser. One summer's day, my mother wanted some blackberries to make a pie. We went down the road to a large blackberry patch that was maybe half as big as a football field. It was one huge briar patch. I had my bowl pretty full of berries and had meandered through the maze of briars all the way to the back of the patch next to the woods. I think I'd eaten more than I'd picked, and I was tired of this berry picking stuff when I spotted some pretty blue flowers and thought, what a good idea, I'll pick these flowers and surprise her when I emerged back on their side of the road. Well, I approached the flowers and I began picking them when something at my feet caught my attention. I had always been told by my grandfather to watch out for snakes, but snake wasn't even on my mind, and the only snakes I had ever seen were small things, maybe 2 or 3 feet long. So I suppose it stands to reason that I didn't recognize the thing stretched out lengthways right at my feet was a huge diamondback rattlesnake. That thing had to be 7 or 8 feet long and was bigger in diameter than a man's arm. I was in awe of how pretty his designs were and thought, oh my, this big a hose laying here sure is neat. I leaned forward to touch it, and my hand was within a few inches of its head when the snake, who had been laying there sunning himself, began to slowly draw up, and I detected the movement. It didn't take my young mind long to begin the reasoning process that this was something to be careful with, and when I focused my eyes on its head, it was looking back at me. I had finally figured out what it was, and decided it was time to depart the briar patch. In an instant, I decided he needed that bowl of berries and handful of blue flowers a lot worse than I did, so I promptly let him hold them. I also decided, rather than fight the maze of turns through all the briars, there was a definite need for a new path straight through the briar patch, directly to the dirt road, which was about 100 feet away, and I promptly began construction of said path. I was screaming at the top of my lungs, "Snake! Snake! Snake!" And it must have been quite a sight to my younger brother and mother when they saw my little bare-skinned ass doing Olympic-style jumps over and directly through the briars. By the time I reached where they were, my younger brother was tugging at her skirt and asking if he could go see the snake. But I couldn't hear her answer to him because by then I was several hundred yards down the road in a dead run for home. Now, it should be noted at this point that I've had many encounters with snakes, both poison and non-poison, and can deal with them just fine, except for those rare occasions when I'm caught unaware and find myself in the immediate vicinity of one of these slimy things. When that happens, my mind reverts back, even if only for a moment or two, to being 6 years old again, and to the fear that was so vividly burned into my memory that day. I will relate a few of these instances in finishing this story. Once, after having moved to live with my father and stepmother in Florida, I was walking down the bank of the O'Galley River and pushed my way under some palm fronds, and a green snake fell from above me and wrapped itself around my neck. Well, let me tell you, when this happens, your mind doesn't say, oh, it's just a green snake. It says, snake, snake, snake. Once in Raymond, Georgia, while driving my railroad truck through some heavy growth of trees and bushes to get into the train yard, a green snake was flipped from one of the limbs through my open window. It landed directly in my lap. Again, my mind said to me, snake, snake, snake. I promptly let him have control of the vehicle while I removed myself from his immediate vicinity. And finish this story, I will relate one more instance worthy of mention. I've had to go out on an old abandoned M-line and inspect 200 insulated boxcars that had been stored there for a couple of years and were now being moved and had to be inspected. The bushes were head high in most places, and as I walked down the long cut of cars, I was walking cautiously, checking not only the train but the bushes as well. From time to time, as you check a long cut of cars that's been parked there at various times, you occasionally look across the other side and see an angle cock valve closed where the train crews had made their last coupling when they shoved the cars in there. Well, that valve has to be opened in order for the air brakes to work when the locomotive comes to pull the cars. About a mile down the track, I looked over and saw an angle cock close and stepped through the bushes into the gauge of the rail between the boxcars. And while watching the bushes behind me, I leaned my body over the couplers and reached down until I felt the valve handle on the other side of the couplers, and I twisted it open. Well, no sooner had I done that, and I was still in the leaned over position over the couplers, I detected movement under my right armpit. I glanced down towards my armpit, and sure enough, I had reached across a dark-colored snake that was on top of the couplers, without even realizing it. As I looked down, his face was right in mine. His head was reared up, as if he was asking me, "What do you want, fool?" Immediately, I was 6 years old again, and the words came to my mind once more. Snake! 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 Well, I broke the world's record for a backwards jump, removing myself from between the boxcars. And as I fell backwards through the bushes, I thought to myself, it ain't worth it. I ain't getting paid enough for this job. I looked back and caught a glimpse of the snake disappearing over the horn of the coupler up inside the center cell where the draft gear is. Later that day, when I returned to the depot, the train crew was in for the day and preparing to go home. The conductor was there, and I told him the 200 cars were ready to be pulled whenever they got around to it. And I related the story of the snake to him. He asked me, what kind of snake was it? I thought about it briefly and replied, George, he didn't offer to show me his credentials, and I didn't wait around to see his ID card. So that's my story on snakes.